again, Paige, thank you for making time for us and our group, the Ghostbusters Containment Unit. Tom and I are very excited to spend some time with you. I don't know if you can tell, but I've got my Ghostbusters 2 colors on. Tom's got his Ghostbuster 1 colors on. I'm a Ghostbusters 2 guy. And so you're part of my film. And so I'm very happy to have you. The first question I had, and part of it is I have 3 kids. They're all younger, but they all dance. And so we are in dance competitions all the time. And so I know that you started off dancing. And so I was just curious what your background was. What kind of dances did you do? What style did you like? And
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, I was a concert dancer. I got my bachelor's and master's at UCLA in
wow.
dance and toured around the world with different companies. Then segued a little bit into commercial dancing a little bit, music video, that world, that
Yeah,
kind of thing. And then I started talking, and that was the end of that. It was just sort of like, oh, now we're acting. And I've been doing that ever since.
that's awesome. That's
Yeah.
awesome. So how,
Always with a little, body language
yeah.
that never goes away.
So how do you get from traveling the world and performing on the stages like that to acting? Like, how did that work for you?
It was a really natural segue in some ways because I was used to, performing
Mhm.
and sort of getting in touch with like a truth and putting it out there. So just adding words to that was just invigorated me as a performer. Like, honestly, the first time I did a scene, my teeth would not stop chattering for 3 days. I just and then I knew, oh, this is what I'm supposed to do because it had such a big impact. So,
Mhm.
yeah, I feel blessed to have found it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I want to dive in, because obviously you're a big piece of Ghostbusters 2 and that scene with Harold in his laboratory. And so, we would definitely want to ask about that, but I want to know, how did you get connected with Ghostbusters 2? How do you go from the dancing, like Matt said, but then now all of a sudden you're in a sequel to like one of the biggest movies of all time?
Oh gosh, I wish I could remember. Um, I, I think my agent just got me submitted. I met with Michael, and then boom, that was it. It's kind of like a flash. I don't know.
That just that simple, huh? Just boom. No, that's awesome. What was
Yeah.
it? So your scene is very memorable in the film. Scott and I joke back and forth about the "take the puppies away" line. It's a very funny scene. How is it working with Harold? We all have great admiration for Harold Ramis, and I'm just curious what your time on the set with him was like, and any takeaways you may have had.
He was a really down to earth, really sweet man. I mean, it must have been winter time. You guys probably know the exact date, but I remember him talking about a ski trip his family was going to go on, and so I think it was right before maybe Christmas break or something. I'm not sure, but that's my fuzzy memory of it. And he was definitely a family man and very generous, conversational, not at all standoffish, just very genuine guy.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, enjoyed it. I enjoyed working with him.
So, after Ghostbusters 2, you do the movie, it comes out, and then it kind of, you move on to your next project. To come back to thinking about Ghostbusters now, years, decades later, when Scott says, "Hey, we're going to go do a con, or we're going to do a signing with these Ghostbusters fans," I mean, does that shock you that people are interested in this movie from so long ago? Like, what's your take on Ghostbusters today?
Oh, wow. Does it shock me? It surprises me and kind of delights me that, it's still bringing joy to this world, and more generations are being introduced to it, and it's just got this life of its own that's pretty cool, because you always think of this film industry as, a little piece of immortality in some way, and this is like kind of a sign of that, right? It just lives on in people's lives and hearts, and that is really cool.
Cool. See,
Yeah.
you're in an interesting spot too in my world, because you cross over from Ghostbusters, which I love so very much, but I'm also, you're in one of my like favorite films of all time, because it's just a really good film, and I'm a really really huge fan of this guy as an actor and a director. But you were in Argo with Ben Affleck as actor and director. So I just wondered if you could just share a little bit with us about what was it like working with Ben as a director versus as an actor?
Oh, wow. Versus as an actor. Ben is super smart. Like he just was like thinking all the time about all the parts, and then he'd become the actor and like become just disappear into this presence that was just there. And then he came back out and he goes, okay, now we're gonna, da 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 da. And yeah, I think he really knows how to tell a story, and that was what really impressed me. Like he just took all the elements and made them add up into something none of us could have foreseen. Like I remember seeing the screening, and John Goodman was sitting behind me, and we were in a little screening room, and then the lights came up, and we just turned to each other with our jaws dropped open, because I mean, it just leapt further off the page than either of us could have imagined.
Right, and that took the award season too by storm. I mean, we're talking Best Picture here, and that's quite an accomplishment. So how does it feel being part of a movie that is in the history books as one of the greatest films of all time because it won that award? Like, how does that feel?
It feels like a huge privilege. It really does. And that it has, relevance, and I think will, for quite some time, not just as a historical piece, but, a lesson around humanity, what we can do and what we shouldn't do.
Yeah. So looking over, here's what I'm curious about. I am not an actor. I'm not great at it at all, but I can appreciate the skill and the talent it takes. But you've acted on stage and on film, writer, director, choreographer. What is the difference? Like as a practitioner of acting and all that, what's the big difference from stage to film?
Wow. Well, some people have described it as aperture, like in a camera,
Mm-hmm.
that the aperture is like wide open for stage, so that you're putting out a certain amount of energy for that. And then for film, it's like you just narrow it down, into a very a much quieter but concentrated stream,
Mm-hmm.
or like painting, the difference between doing, big, not broad, I don't want to say broad because there is detail and depth to stage acting, but there's an amplification to it that is just much smaller in film, but it's still from the same source, still from, whatever truth and you're grounding your part in, and whatever piece of the story you're telling. That's the other thing. The process is very different. For theater, it's just a much longer
Mm-hmm.
process of finding and interpreting the story and the characters. And then film, you just all come together like this crazy implosion almost, to create something together in the moment.
So when you're live on stage in theater, do you carry like this pressure to get it right? Whereas I would imagine with film, there's multiple cuts and multiple takes, and so you probably don't feel that as much as. Or when you're on stage, are you able just to feed on the energy and kind of just be in the moment and that fear kind of go away?
For me, on stage, you're taking a full journey. So you're not just doing one plot point, right? So you can, for me, I can be carried by that journey and get lost in that journey and be taken by that journey. Whereas in film, when you're doing something over, you kind of come out of it and you think, okay, we're going to adjust this way, or I can do that. I like this about it, or they wanted this, or they want this, spot, hit that
Mm-hmm.
spot over there. So you're much more going back and forth between your left and right brain. And it's just a skill to be able to drop whatever technical things
Hmm.
were talked about, and then drop back into the moment. So different skill set, and definitely for me easier to just get lost in on stage,
Yeah.
or found on stage.
It's interesting that you said the full journey, because I was in theater in high school, but it's that moment, that night on the stage, that lives and dies in the moment, and it's kind of gone after the night to the sands of time. Versus, with a film, the work that you do, it may end up in the movie, it may not. Things change, studios get involved, and all that, and who knows what it's going to look like, but it's then out there in the ether forever. And so that's my long roundabout way of winding it back to a question that Scott would be remiss if we didn't ask. Did you shoot a scene where you took away the puppy? And if so, how did you deal with Catherine Reitman and her attitude about it, I'm sure?
I wish I could remember. I don't think we did. I'm not sure.
It would have been a pretty funny one, but the way it's in
Funny
the
if you
movie.
like kids crying.
Right. Yeah, I don't think so. And I can't even, I'm trying to remember if Harold came up with that in the moment. I don't know, maybe you guys know.
You
It
know,
sounds like something to
I
me.
kind of
100%.
feel like he did. But don't hold me to that. I'm not,
Well,
it's just
so
like a
much.
vague, faint memory.
Yeah, so much of Ghostbusters for both films, the charm is just the ability of those guys to improv on the spot.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, and Tom knows this well too, is there's not a lot out there on Ghostbusters 2. There's a lot more on Ghostbusters, the first film, behind the scenes and all that, but not a lot for Ghostbusters 2. So we don't know a whole lot. And so that's why we're fascinated that we get to have opportunities like this to talk to you about it a little bit.
Right.
So last question for you. When you look back over your career, and Star Trek is a big thing that a lot of people are into, Ghostbusters, all your work on stage and theater, what is it that makes you the most proud? What are you the most proud of what you've been able to accomplish or do in your career?
Ooh, the most proud. Well, I've been working with Cornerstone Theater Company for 20 some odd years, and we do community engaged work, and we create plays with and about communities all over Los Angeles and California and across the nation, and telling stories that are rarely told,
Hmm.
about people that we maybe don't interface with on a day-to-day basis. That's what I'm really, really proud of, is making that connection personally, bringing that connection through the community, bringing that connection to the broader world. Because it's all about being human, right? When it comes down to it,
Absolutely.
in
Yeah.
any of these forms. So that one speaks the loudest in terms of my personal human contact.
Yeah. No, that's great. That's great. And again, I love being able to hear that. I know so much of dance and acting and writing, especially, is all about telling that story. And we're very thankful that we get to hear that and get to share that in this moment with you, Paige. And so again, we are so thankful that you've made time to speak with us today and talk about your career a little bit. Thankful that you're allowing us to send stuff and have you sign stuff for our collections, because our heart is we want collectors to be able to get true, authentic, because there's so many fake things out there and so many scams and this, that, and the other. We just want to help collectors like Tom and I get pieces they wouldn't be able to get and get stuff that's real and that they can trust. And so thank you for being available to help us with that. And
Of course. My pleasure, really.
yeah, and we wish you all the best, especially in this weird season that we're in. And we look forward to being in touch with you again here very soon.
Yes, me too. And I'm wishing all of you the best. And I'm sorry we can't see each other in person right now, but hopefully we will someday.